What do you think the CBN is trying to achieve with the licensing of this payment service banks?
Okay, I think that over the years, the Central Bank of Nigeria has tried to improve financial access by carrying on several initiatives. Now, some of these initiatives have been registering mobile money operators. They've also tried the tiered customer know your customer scheme, along with other initiatives. What has happened is financial inclusion has not improved. The target of 80% by 2020 has actually gone worse over the years. What has happened is that has been blamed on the Boko Haram insurgents as well as the economic downturn over the years. I think what they're trying to do now by licensing payment service banks is they're trying to find an all-inclusive way of coming up with something that would help improve financial inclusion over time. They are meant to, over time, provide deposit payments and remittances for those who are the most excluded. And if you look at the most excluded, they're usually in the north, they're usually women, and they're usually youths. What payment service banks are going to do is they're going to provide a secure, technologically secure way to provide access for individuals, small businesses, and low-income households in the rural areas.
Now, just briefly, how are these banks, these payment service banks, different from the traditional commercial banks that we have?
Okay, I think the main difference is in the business model. So if you look at the payment service banks and their business model, it's a little more targeted and it is a bit limited and directly trying to provide access in the rural areas. So payment service banks, for example, can only provide deposit and remittance services. The only other thing they can do is, okay, they have some limitations. They can't provide loans, advances, or guarantees. They can't play in the foreign exchange market. In addition, they can only invest in federal government securities. So they're a bit limited. Also, payment service banks can actually be non-financial institutions. The license allows telcos, fintechs, FMCGs, and other players to actually come into the market and provide access for the people who need it.
Now, as far as impact is concerned, what will be the expected impact? Could there be an immediate impact on the space?
So I think what the payment service banks are trying to address is actually their license even allows them mainly operate in the rural areas. So what that means is that they would actually be going to where financial inclusion is needed the most. I also believe that because they have a distribution network and they have access to retail services, they have access to petrol stations, they will make use of the post office sometimes. I think that would also help them give access to the consumers that need it, better access than traditional banks can give them.
What hurdles do you foresee these banks experiencing as they begin to offer these services?
Okay, so if we look at the only place where payment service banks have been registered, if you look at the problems they've had in India, one of the major problems they've had is in terms of the viability of the business model itself. So there's the question about is it actually commercially viable? Because they would have to provide higher interest rates to attract people into their ecosystem. Then they would also have to only invest in security. So the margin is smaller, and what we've seen in India is that majority of them are having challenges. So for payment service banks, I think they would have the issue of using their value chain to the best of their abilities, because it's a really, really tough terrain to go into.
I imagine that the regulator is aware of these potential challenges, but do you think that this is something that they can surmount? Do you think that there is a provision to deal with these challenges?
Okay, so I must confess the challenges are enormous. So if you look at Nigeria in the interim, you would say the identification. How do you identify the people that are going to be your consumers? In Diamond Bank, for example, with our partnership with MTN, the challenges we've had is sometimes knowing the customer, bringing customers into the ecosystem that you cannot trust. That affects the security of the ecosystem. But I believe that with time, if they start and they start addressing some of the issues that currently exist, they would be able to use their value chain better. I think that also because the agents will be in the community, there's a higher chance that they will know their customers better. So there will be challenges, but the hope is that with time, the strongest players like the telcos, like the FMCGs, like the fintechs will find a way to address the issues that are in the system and still be profitable in the process.